Okay, John, I'm going to try this again. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. At the time that the coroner's office, the coroner's investigator, and the homicide investigators responded to the scene, there was no evidence of foul play that was quite obvious. So subsequent to that, they ruled it an apparent suicide, but it's not a formal ruling. Until the death certificate is signed and certified by the coroner's office, the investigation is still open, and they have not reached a determination as to the cause of death or the manner of death. I hope that answers your question.
So concerned, especially because it's been 2 hanging black men from trees 50 miles apart in 2 weeks. And I'm sure we all want to know what's being done. How it's a shame. Like, as a white woman, I'm afraid of the police here too. What's being done to quell the terror and fear that's being struck in the hearts of our minority communities?
For Palmdale Station, our personnel are out. We are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, patrolling all of our areas. Again, we have a large patrol station, but we're out there. We're handling calls for service. We're engaging with the community daily. We do in the neighborhood of 130 to 170 community events a year. We are out there meeting and greeting all of our personnel and, again, responding to calls. We have in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 calls per day that we handle. In the summertime, those numbers go up a little bit more than that. But again, we are engaged. And our personnel, again, because the majority of our personnel live and work in Palmdale and the AV, when we're off duty, we're still working in a sense because we're out in the community. If we see something, we say something, and that's something we're encouraging the public to say as well. If they see something that troubles them or they're concerned about, call the station. We'll send personnel out there to check it out.
Next person we're going to do is Jessica.
Okay, Jessica, please go with your question. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. I just was reading or heard rumors that there is a KK group in the Antelope. Is that true? And also, if that's the case, why? I've also heard about things that trying to get the group under the terrorist act or whatever, like to be named a terrorist group. Why aren't those things being done? Because obviously, if these events were not suicides, they're actual lynchings. And, I wouldn't put it past a group like that doing something like that. So I'm just wondering what's being done about this kind of a situation.
Well, looking at the Antelope Valley, we do have some white gangs out there. Just like any community that large, you're going to have different gangs, different demographics, and we do have skinhead gangs, and we have a history of skinhead gangs. And the size of those gangs or population of those gangs have varied over time. There's an ebb and a flow to it, and the ones that are identified gangs are covered. They're covered by the STEP Act. And crimes committed by them are looked at from the standpoint by our gang units is if they get gang enhancements or so forth on those. So they are prosecuted that way, and the laws are enforced against them that way. Hopefully that answers your question. I think Sheriff Villanueva wants to add to that.
Leap to a conclusion based on been a suspicion or based on a rumor. We have to follow facts. That is how any criminal investigation is done. However, we also maintain a very, very big capacity to monitor the activities, hate groups, extremist groups that are present throughout LA County in one form or another. We have the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. That's a fusion center between the FBI, the state attorney general's office, Department of Justice, the sheriff's department, LAPD, and we have a hate crime task force. We have all these different partners within the law enforcement community, within the community themselves. So we're constantly monitoring hate groups and see if anything that goes beyond just them exercising their very odious, but their First Amendment right to express themselves and taking any step towards acting on those First Amendment expressions. And we'll jump on that as soon as we have any idea that something like that is going on. We're there right away, and we're going to hold people accountable for breaking the rule of law. And however, we still have to go based on the facts. We can't go past the facts. And so far, that is what we're doing. We're doing it by the book, making sure we go from step A to step B to step C. And we're not going to jump to a conclusion or act on a rumor. We have to have some facts that support these things. And so if anybody here sees something, again, as the captain said, you got to say something. All right. Don't do the slow burn and quiet because you think no one will do anything about it. Yes, we do. Some things that will not arise to a hate crime can be still classified as a hate incident. And last, I want to remind people that our Homicide Bureau is one of the premier investigative units in the entire nation. And I praise what they do for a reason. They're called the Bulldogs, and their tenacity to bring justice to a victim of a crime is unparalleled anywhere in the nation. And we have a cold case unit that will reach back decades to solve cases, and the complex investigations involves a lot of people trying to, dealing with organized crime, and there are crimes for hire or murders for hire, all these different complex investigation. These people do it, and they do a phenomenal job at it, but it's a tough job, and it's easy to second guess what they do. However, their work ethic speaks for themselves. And so they're in good hands. The family of Mr. Fuller needs to know that they're definitely in good hands, and we're going to have a good resolution for this in terms of getting the facts known. And we're putting all the resources available at our disposal just to get to the facts of the matter. And hopefully we'll have some closure on this. And it still remains a tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Fuller's family on this issue. And let's go on to the next question.
I want to learn a little bit more about what goes into the, I don't know what you would call a determination or a predetermination of foul play. And can you also speak to the concerns of, frankly, a lot of African Americans find it hard to believe that a young African American boy would, if it were a suicide, to do what he did at the square, just given the symbolic nature of that act. Can you speak to that as well, and how that factors into the whether or not foul play was found when the scene was discovered?
Very well. This is Captain Wegener from Homicide again. So just a brief summary of what goes into this type of investigation. Initially, the homicide investigator will respond to the scene with the coroner's investigator and the coroner's technician. The scene will be dissected. It will be documented. It'll be studied so that we have a good record of the scene as it appeared when the incident occurred. Subsequent to that, we start following leads, whether that be leads that are developed at the scene, leads developed from the coroner and his or her examination of the remains, or any witness or family members who come forward. From then, we also will start checking the surroundings, such things as video cameras or witnesses who might have been in the area. We'll try to substantiate where the victim came from. Which direction did he walk from when he entered the park? Was he alone? Was there someone with him? All these questions we ask ourselves, and we try to get the answers for them. In the meantime, we're getting tips. We're oftentimes getting WE tips or Crime Stopper tips, which give us other leads to follow up on. In other cases, when there's a pattern or a series of events, we'll study those other crimes to see if those are related to the incident that we're investigating. So that's just a very small portion of what we do, and we can never put a timeline on these events because as the investigations progress, we developed new leads, which take a. But I can assure you we won't stop and we won't cut any corners until we have all the answers to the questions that we're seeking regarding this case.
Now, issue related to why he did where he did, or what happened and where he was found. I don't pretend to be a subject matter expert on mental health, but we do have a lot of challenges in the AV with crisis calls from the community. And I always say that suicides and homicides do not happen in the moment. People have a problem, whatever that problem may be, whatever the origin of it may be. Many people end up focusing on self-harm or hurting other people to resolve their problem. They think about it. They sometimes will talk about it. And that's why we really encourage people to communicate with us when they hear things that are out of character for an individual. We can't begin to explain why or how he might have ended up in the park the way he did and what he was thinking about and how he was wanting to solve a problem. But I do know that mental health is a big issue, and we are trying to partner with our community-based organizations that can help us reach out to the community so that they can find help and not think that suicide is the only answer to their challenges.
I was just wondering that if you guys could get to the the security camera issue. If you could get to the community a little bit quicker with an answer, so that way people don't have the color issue. Because the first thing that goes in somebody's mind is color issue. If we could just stop that as a community in order to join together as to be one as a community. That's my question, is why is the way to get it in there a little quicker. That's it.
So we've addressed the issue about the cameras. There were no security cameras that were focused on the park in the surrounding area. We continue to canvass the surrounding areas, and really we're putting the request for help out to the community. If you know of a security camera that's available that might have footage of Mr. Fuller walking through the area from any direction, we would like that brought to our attention. Right now, we did not have any security camera footage in the park of the particular act.
So I think we can all agree that in the case of Robert Fuller, there's two very probable outcomes. Either he was murdered or he died by suicide. And in both cases, I think the LASD failed in keeping the safety of the community. Let's assume that he was murdered. And if he was, it was most likely a hate crime, a modern day lynching right outside the city hall. It was like a symbolic act of hate. And if this were the case, then what I'm saying is that where was the LASD during that time? In the public, right outside the city hall. They failed to keep the community safe. Now, let's assume it was a suicide and that Robert Fuller was dealing with a lot of mental health issues. In this case, I also believe that the LASD failed the community, because if it was in fact a suicide, then we failed to keep one person from dying by suicide. And it does raise the question, it raises the question about mental health resources, specifically in the Antelope Valley. I'm not sure if you guys were listening in, but earlier the People's Budget of LA spoke to the Council of Supervisors, and one of the things they brought up was mental health issues. And obviously that's very in line with what happened with Robert Fuller, especially if we're assuming it was a suicide. So my question is, don't you think it's time to defund the police and instead invest in alternative forms of safety? And if we truly do care about our community, then why is it that we're not investing in our community and that we're taking money away from these resources that could be used to prevent instances like this? Thank you.
We're not going to assume anything. We'll find out. We make decisions based on facts. The facts that we have today do not indicate anything other than than what we've already announced. And until we have some evidence that points to another direction, we're going to continue gathering our facts. We're going to make sure we've exhausted all of our administrative or investigative resources, and we're going to arrive at a conclusion that might not be, there is no pretty way to do this. Someone died who didn't need to die. However, that's an issue that's a question for a broader society, the issue of mental health and the fact that our young ones choose to end their life. In fact, I just got word right now as we're speaking of one of our own employees who chose to end his own life. And right while we were doing this town hall. So it's not a question of who's to blame when someone commits suicide. Did society as a whole, did we do our best to prevent it from happening? Was someone needed help and didn't get the help they needed? Was it available at the time? Those are questions. We have a Department of Mental Health for the county. We have resources. But that public budget campaign you're talking about, if I understand, asking for a 90% cut in the budget for LAPD, I would suggest if you're that certain about it, put it on a ballot and let the entire community vote on it. Because right now, there's a narrow group of people doing most of the talking, and most of the community has been silent. And we can always reallocate our priorities in terms of the budget, but defunding law enforcement and the public safety service that we do is not going to be an answer. It's not going to solve anything. If we have to be leaner as a county government and trim the overall bureaucracy, so there's a lot more of the people that provide the services to the community and a lot less of the bureaucrats, well, that's definitely one thing I'm going to agree in agreement with you on that. However, defunding the police is not an answer, and it never will be the answer, because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, in essence, is all you're doing.
Hi, if you can hear me. My initial question was already answered. So my next question would be, when do you expect the autopsy report to be ready for Robert Fuller?
This is Captain Wegener again. So the autopsy report and the full coroner's report, which includes the toxicology results and analysis of that, we do not have a definite date when it is done. They have assured me from the coroner's office that they will expedite the processes that are necessary to ascertain the results, and they will publish it as soon as it is done. When they do publish that with a ruling, a mode, and the manner of death, that will be made public.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm directing the conversation toward Alex Villanueva. He says that he would like all the facts in place before there is a conclusion into Robert Fuller's death, and that's fair assessment. But however, in this country, Black people have been lynched hanging from trees for hundreds of years, and the KKK has infiltrated police unions since it's been inception. Walter Francis White was a Black man who infiltrated the KKK and discovered that sheriffs, police deputies were involved in these white supremacist groups, and they still are in fact today. So, Mr. Villanueva, what are you doing in your union to get rid of and infiltrate these people that have been in your corrupt union?
I'm not sure. I'm the sheriff of Los Angeles County, and I run the LA County Sheriff's Department. I don't run a police union, and I don't want to ascribe a union as being corrupt without facts to support it. And I also don't want to paint a broad brush because of the acts of perhaps in the southern states where the Ku Klux Klan is still active to this day and very prevalent. And we hear them on the news now and then, how they infiltrate local law enforcement. Maybe that's a question they can answer. I'm not going to speak for those states, but here in California, particularly here in Los Angeles County, there is no room for the Ku Klux Klan in law enforcement. Absolutely not. And if and when we ever get our hands on someone in that category, they will not be an employee of this organization. That is absolutely not tolerated. So it's always wise never to paint with a broad brush in any circumstance.
We're having a hard time hearing you. We need you to speak up.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Is that better?
There you go. That's better. Thank you.
All right, I do apologize. I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. I wanted to become a law enforcement officer. I have a big question. I was at the recent protest that came to the sheriff department in Palmdale, and when we went back to the park, I came back home, and when I looked back at my media, I saw a lot of armed sheriffs pointing weapons at peaceful protests because I was one of them. I'm trying to understand what happened within the 30 minutes that it took me to get home for it to come to that. There was a peaceful protest. They were in the middle of City Hall. So that means that there was a big gap between the street and the protesters. What changed in 30 minutes for it to go from peaceful all morning to when the sheriff deputy showed up in riot gear pointing at children? There were children there. I'm a minister, and there were elderly people there. Can someone please answer that?
In the process of responding to the events that were going on, at one point there were water bottles that were thrown from the crowd towards the deputies. Now we realized that the population, the group, was made up of a lot of different people, including yourself, adults with children. There were teachers with students. There were pastors with parishioners. And so it was not just one group, but it was made up of a bunch of different people. And it didn't seem like there was one particular leader who had control of the whole group. So some people within the group were able to act out. But also the group was working to make sure that they kept it as a peaceful protest, which we're appreciative of as well. We know a voice, a message was being delivered. We wanted to hear that message. We wanted to share that message and embrace it because, again, we are part of the community and we respect what was trying to be said. And we wanted to make sure that everybody was cared for. Again, we've got to look at the public as well as the demonstrators there, the deputies that are working that event, and make sure everybody is safe as we move forward.
I want to add to that. One, we want to support peaceful protests everywhere throughout Los Angeles County. In fact, throughout this entire period of civil unrest, we've been doing exactly that. I know the first nights of the protests were marred by a lot of acts of vandalism, looting, arson, and assaults. And unfortunately, that really destroyed part of the intent of the groups. But thankfully, that transitioned over the first few days into more organized, more peaceful, and a lot larger demonstrations. The ones in front of the Hall of Justice here, the ones up on Hollywood, all of those were done very, very well, and everyone was very respectful, both the participants respecting law enforcement and law enforcement respecting their First Amendment rights. The problem, though, is when you mix people into a crowd that is peacefully protesting with people that are deliberately trying to agitate, throwing water bottles that have frozen, for example. There's all kinds of things that are played behind the scenes, and it's not the front crowd holding the signs. It's the ones that are 2 or 3 or 4 people back that try to use the peaceful protesters as a way to obscure their acts of assault. And really, we took a lot of rocks and bottles and chunks of metal, all kinds of things, fireworks that were thrown our way during the protests. But by and large, our deputies were very, very disciplined, and they did not deploy any force indiscriminately. I know we have 2 incidents that we're investigating still, but overall, if you look at the totality of the picture, they were very, very well disciplined, well trained, and they did exactly as we wanted them to do, which was protect the peaceful protesters from being harmed and separate the ones that were there as opportunists, looters, from that crowd. And we're here to protect life and property. And unfortunately, a lot of people lost their livelihoods, they lost employment as a result of the people that irresponsibly decided to take advantage and loot, vandalize, and so forth, and trash the city. That happened up in the Fairfax district. It happened in Santa Monica. It happened in Long Beach. Other areas of the county were spared, and we were there in time, and we were able to prevent that from happening. But we never, ever stopped a lawful protest from taking place. In fact, we're there to ensure their safety. So I want to make sure people understand that.
Hi. Robert Fuller's friends and family have said that he was not suicidal and that they never witnessed any signs of unstable behavior. If anything should be the default assumption about a young Black man found hanging in public, we would think it would be foul play. What evidence did you find to the contrary when he had every indication of being a happy and healthy young man?
Hi, Captain Wegener from Homicide again. First of all, we don't make a default assumption one way or the other. We evaluate the evidence that is at the scene based on what we see and where it takes us. We establish the facts. We don't make assumptions on either side. Furthermore, I would love to have my investigators speak with the family. We had a relationship going on early on, and then at one point they ceased the conversation with our department and hired an attorney. So I would love to talk to them and have them tell me the same thing that they apparently have told you. But at this point, they have not done that.
Hi. So just sitting, listening throughout this meeting, it has been very, very traumatic. I mean, I'm a Black woman. I was a resident of Palmdale for 20 years. And we're talking about a human being here. We're talking about someone that lost their life. And regardless of how it happened, I'm asking, I'm imploring, like, where is the urgency here? I know you've answered the questions about the initial assumption or determination or whatever. I know you've answered questions about what's happening next, but the community is coming to you asking for answers. I mean, just like the fact that everyone thought it was a suicide at first, it didn't take much for the community to start talking about on Twitter, and then the public pressure, it's what's causing this more in-depth look into it. I'm just asking, where is the same urgency that was shown to protesters, rightfully so, asking for more answers? You know, that was an immediate response to them. Where is the same response to this case? We spent a lot of this meeting talking about random things like the Instagram photo of the dog and the water bottles. And yes, all of this has happened, but we're talking about Robert Fuller. We want answers for what happened. We want this urgency, and we want solid answers on when we're going to find out more. It's astonishing to me that, especially in this current climate, that we didn't immediately look at this as a homicide, or that this person was murdered. I just want to know, I know you said you don't know when the coroner's report will come out, but I want to know what you're doing about getting urgent answers, like how you're putting the pressure on and what exactly we should be expecting next. Should we be having more follow-ups? Should we be having more town hall meetings? Like, what is it going to take to have the answers for Robert Fuller and the justice for Robert Fuller that he deserves?
Well, first and foremost, I will tell you this: we do have an urgency in resolving this issue, and we've devoted all the resources that we have available to come to the correct determination and the death investigation. And we're not leaving any rock unturned. However, it's going to be at the pace of the investigation, doing the job the right way. There's no cutting corners, and we can't just use the word urgency and somehow do some things at twice the speed. It's going to happen the way a proper death investigation is going to happen. And they're going to double check everything they did. One set of investigators does it, and when they're done, an entire different set of investigators are going to go through the entire thing from start to finish to make sure the conclusion is supported. And if there's any avenue that shows us to go in a different direction, they're going to exhaust all of those avenues as well. So this process has gone on since the very beginning. And I think the coroner is in our press conference this morning. They indicated that they put temporarily that thing on their website, which caused a lot of the concern from the community that seemed premature. But we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. We're working with the coroner's office. We're also working with the Attorney General's office. I had a nice conversation with Javier Becerra, who's the Attorney General, and they're going to monitor our investigation and see if they're going to arrive at the same conclusion we do or not. And we've also reached out to the FBI, to the Viviette Morgan, who's the special agent in charge of the criminal division, and the civil rights division of the FBI is also monitoring this. So you have a very large array of different organizations, 4 different organizations, if you count us, the coroner's office, the Attorney General, and the FBI. And there's really nothing else that can be done on this. And you're also dealing with, again, one of the premier investigative agencies in the entire nation, which is our Homicide Bureau. So the investigation is in good hands, and if there's anything that we're missing, please let us know. But we've given everything available to resolve this issue of the tragic passing of Mr. Fuller. And hopefully that answers your question. But there is not another button or something to push beyond what we've already done. Not in our arsenal.
Thank you. If anything, I would just implore that the team investigating is diverse. I would implore that implicit bias is something that's taken into account, just again, with the current climate and everything going on, especially knowing Palmdale, being from there myself, going to high school where Confederate flags were flown. Like, there's just a lot of politics and different issues here at play. So I would just implore that a diverse team is looking into this case.
No, I hear you. And that's not a bad idea at all. And I know the issue about the Confederate flags flying, they're not as popular today as they were in the recent past. And that's a good thing. And hopefully we won't see them flying ever again. But, I'm not going to tolerate racism in any form, much less among the elite ranks of our homicide investigators. So they're going to do their job passionately, and they're always going to be pursuing justice where justice needs to be served. And if this is a case on the other side where it's tragically self-inflicted, well, still by the same reason, we're going to get to the bottom of it. So we have full closure for the family.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go.
Hi, thank you. First and foremost, I want to say that I do not blame or think that all police officers are bad. That's the first order of my business, because I know too many officers in my own family and that live in integrity and try to be great people, not necessarily bad people. Also, I want to say, and I'm just covering this real fast so I can ask these questions. First place, I don't think all white people are bad. I don't think all black people are bad. I don't think mixed people are bad, nor do I think brown people are all bad. Now, we have bad in all of them. But my question is, I'm really concerned with how and what I want to do as far as to participate in helping with changing the laws. Okay. And number one, I'm thinking on, when I think about the Constitution that says we the people. And then I think about the Declaration of Independence that says all men are created equal. Well, that's not true. And that was written in 1776. So somehow we have got to figure out to change that and to make that right for today. That has not been a right from the beginning. It hasn't been since 1776. It did not serve the black public. It did not serve the mixed public. It has not served the brown public. So that is my first concern. And that you guys, I know, don't really have an answer for. I just had to throw that out at you, that's what I'm going to be looking at. Number two, I'd like to ask the question, how did you guys come to the conclusion of suicide? I know you don't have the autopsy yet. And I know you're just not sure yet. That's understandable. But that was what was portrayed first, that it was suicide. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I went out to that event at the park. I looked at that tree. I saw no physical damage to that flimsy little tree there. I saw no physical damage, indicating that he had to throw something over and practice that to hang himself. I didn't see that. Also, I did not see any pressure in the ground suggesting that he stood on something to hurt himself. So I didn't see that. And so that is the question. How did you guys come up with that first? And then before you answer that, I want you to understand that had to be a blind spot. Who would know that blind spot And what I mean is, there's no cameras available. You got the mayor right there. I understand COVID and people are all at home, but you got the fire department right across the street. There's no cameras. You got all of this government building. There's no cameras. And that right there had to be a blind spot that somebody knew about. Tell me something, please.
Okay, let me see if I can answer your question. This is Captain Wegener from Homicide again. First of all, regarding the videos, I can't answer as to why there aren't videos in the park. I can just tell you there aren't videos in the park, and they don't cover any part of that park. Why the city doesn't have video, I don't know. But my job is to establish whether or not there is video and whether we can use it in our. And I'm just telling you there is no video. And there's nothing available for us. That would make my job and my investigator's job much easier if there was video here today. And then again, as far as determining that it's anything a suicide and nothing else, that has not been determined. What we noticed from the tree initially is it was very easily climbable. We also noticed that the rope was secured in the tree up above. It wasn't secured to a place on the ground. So where the rope was secured in the tree, someone had to be up in the tree to secure that rope. We never alleged or we never indicated that we thought that there was a chair or anything in which the victim stood upon prior to the hanging. We believe that, quite frankly, that it was accessed from the branch above, which is quite sturdy. If you're looking at the proper tree, it's quite sturdy. All this is part of the investigation. All this is going to be documented in photographs. All this is going to be researched. And again, although there are no videos in the park itself, we are looking at the exterior sides of the park to see if we can find the victim traversing the area either by himself or with someone else. It's all part of the overall investigation.